Hey there, everybody. Pete here from Comic Book Geezers. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today we've got another one of those kind of underground bands that surprisingly a lot of people have asked for, and especially since I did Sir Lord Baltimore just a few days ago. People are like, well, Pete, what about that other really kind of underground heavy band from the early 70s, Dust? D-U-S-T, that is right. So another pretty cool trio that made some pretty heavy sounds. Only two albums from these guys. Okay, released in 1971-72 and then disappeared from the world forevermore. But a couple guys pretty notable, right? So the band was made up of a guy named Richie Wise on guitars and vocals. A guy named Mark Bell on drums. You might be thinking, Mark Bell? Why does that name sound familiar? Who is Mark Bell? Well, otherwise known as Marky Ramone from the Ramones. Okay, Mark Bell is actually his real name. And a guy named Kenny Aronson, who played bass and assorted guitar things and what have you. Kenny Aronson, of course, played with tons of people. Most notably, you probably remember him. He's the kind of funny-looking bass player guy with the glasses and the big hair from the Hagar, Sean, Aronson, and Shreve album, but he's done like tons of other stuff. A pretty notable guy, bass player, producer, writer in the industry. So, three guys, two of which kind of went on to big business elsewhere after this band Dust. So, both albums released on Kama Sutra Records. Okay. Both albums pretty eclectic, I think. We'll talk about each one of them here. So there's only two of them, so this is going to be a pretty quick ranking show, but worth talking about because I think in the annals of heavy rock history or proto-metal, both of these albums and this band in general seem to come up quite a bit. So I'm going to rank them in my order of preference, and first I'm going to go with my number 2 here is actually the debut, self-titled Dust from 1971. Kind of a pretty crazy looking album cover there, right? Kind of lurid. There's the guys in the band, the camel on the back. This is a pretty different album from the second album, I think. This album, ironically, overall, is not a very heavy album. You got, a bunch of tunes on here that are more kind of, I don't know. Let's just go through them. You got the first couple. So you've got Stone Woman, Chasing Ladies, and Going Easy. All three of them are kind of like a mix of like boogie rock. Like kind of think like Foghat, Status Quo, all right, mixed with a little like kind of southern rock. There's lots of slide guitars. Like I said, kind of like hard rock, boogie rock, just kind of not very heavy. Pretty good, though. Like I said, some good guitar work. The vocals are good. The rhythms are good. Really good drumming. I mean, Mark, really good drummer. He shows a different side to his playing here, which is kind of neat. But these songs are just, they're not very heavy. Like I said, you like Status Quo and Foghat and maybe some Savoy Brown and things like that. Kind of bluesy, kind of southerny. Good, though. All right, good. It's not till you get to song number 4 on here, which is Love Me Hard, that the kind of the metal comes out, the real heavy stuff, the guns come out. A lot of big, insistent riffs on here and bashing drums all over the place. And that's probably the first instance on this album where it's like all of a sudden that kind of proto-metal sound really comes out. That's followed up by From a Dry Camel, which is another pretty heavy song. It's more kind of doom-laden. So this is kind of doomy. It's got big, heavy, slower riffs, lots of wah-wah. It's 9+ minutes long, which is kind of neat. Big bass lines from Kenny on this song. Really good song. Like I said, kind of doomy, kind of like Pentagram-ish in spots. Then you've got Often Shadows Felt is kind of like progressive folk. A lot of acoustic guitars. It's got, like I said, this is 1971, right? So the psychedelic movement's still kind of infiltrating their music. But yet somehow the song feels a little heavy. Even though there's no big riffing on the song or anything like that, it has like kind of like a heavy vibe, even though it is mostly acoustic and kind of folky. Okay. Then you got, the end of the album. That's the whole album, right? For the most part. Yeah, it is. And then you've got Loose Goose, which is an instrumental. It's kind of fast and frantic. It's kind of like old school rock and roll, but it's, like I said, it's instrumental. A lot of really cool rumbling bass, and drums and heavy riffs and stuff like that going on are pretty cool. definitely pretty cool. You got a bonus track called Stone Woman on the CD, which is, again, kind of similar to the rest of the album. But decent album. Very varied, not overly heavy. Like I said, probably 2 out of all the songs on here actually have enough heft to qualify as kind of proto-metal. Not an overall very heavy album at all. It's funny because, you look at the cover and you're thinking, wow, that's probably some crushing, early hard rock metal. But I would say, a good chunk of the album is really not that heavy at all. It's not until the second album, which is actually my favorite of the two. This is called Hard Attack, H-A-R-D Attack, not Heart Attack. And yes, that is a Frank Frazetta album cover there. Classic Frazetta. Love that album cover. Love that painting. Here's the guys in the band. There we go. Okay, released a year later. This is actually a much heavier album. So starts off with Pull Away So Many Times. Fast melodic, somewhat heavy, but really good vocal harmonies, catchy melodies and things like that. But some really big bass lines from Kenny Aronson. Really good bass player. He's pretty heavy on these albums in general. And then you got kind of like layers of acoustic and electric guitars. Pretty well done, kind of like, again, it's one of those songs that's kind of like 2 parts to it, hence the double title, Pull Away / So Many Times. Good song. Then you got Walk in the Soft Rain, kind of harkens back to the first album. It's that mix of psych and folk, plus a little bit of hard rock riffing in there. Pretty good song. Okay, Thusly Spoken is more psych with bits of prog rock. You got piano, organ, and strings, kind of a lush track again. Kind of different here, showing like all the different facets of this band. Learning to Die is where things get really, really heavy on this album. That's a blistering heavy rock. It's got big crashing drums from Mark. All right, snarling vocals from Richie. Just really, really good track. Really heavy. And you know what I get a little bit of on this particular song? Again, we're looking at 1972 here. But I hear little bits of it. I'm not saying that this band ever followed these guys or took from these guys or were influenced from these guys, but I hear a little bit of the very, very early album, like first album or 2 from Manowar. It's kind of the formula I hear here. So I'm not saying that these guys, influenced Manowar, but I hear like very, very early U.S. power metal in that particular song. Okay, that's Learning to Die. Then you got All in All, another really cool kind of like psych-infused hard rocker with some pretty tasty guitars. You got Ivory is another instrumental, so they got 1 on each album. This instrumental, however, is really heavy, pretty close to metal. Some big riffs, intricate rhythms, really, really good. And then it's followed up by what could be the heaviest song on either album, and it, of course, is the last song on the album. It's a song called Suicide. Huge riffs, and we're talking like Budgie, Sir Lord, Baltimore, even Sabbath. Okay, big riffs, heavy as all hell. It just so menacing. And then you got Mark just absolutely pounding the shit out of the drums. Just a really heavy song. It's like, I think if again, a lot of people talk about these albums as being like kind of like the heaviest of the time. They're really not, because again, there are a couple tracks on each that are pretty heavy, but for the most part, these albums aren't that heavy at all. But I would say definitely Suicide is one of them, Learning to Die, and then Love Me Hard, probably, and From a Dry Camel. There's actually really 4 very heavy songs, 2 from each. Okay, this album overall probably a little bit heavier, a little more rocking than this one, but both really good because I can appreciate the diversity and the different styles that are going on in these albums. But maybe that's kind of the problem. It's like almost like this band didn't quite know what they wanted to do with themselves. Are we a heavy band? Are we more of kind of like a bluesy boogie band? Are we a folk band? Are we a psych band? Again, it's 1971, 72. A lot of changes happening in music around that time, so who the hell knows? But as kind of hard rock rarities from the underground, from the early 70s, these are both pretty notable. Like I said, most people think very highly of these, the people who have heard of them, I should say. So there you have it. Curious to see what you guys think about these 2 dust semi-underground classics. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Coming up this weekend, we've got an interview with 2 of the founders, 2 founding members of Glass Hammer, great U.S. prog band, coming up tomorrow. What else is happening tomorrow? I'm hoping to get to this weekend. We'll see how it goes, but hoping to do ranking the albums for Eloy, great German prog / space rock band, have been around for a million years. Also hoping to do a ranking the albums of Pain of Salvation, great Swedish progressive metal act who have been around for about, close to 20 years, I would think, or thereabouts. Something like that. Hopefully that's coming this weekend as well. I'm also going to do a Ranking the Albums of the Raspberries, a great power pop band that rocks pretty hard, has a lot of really, really good songs, so I want to squeeze that in as well. And then just confirmed, all right? A lot of you guys have been asking, where's Chris Allo been? Well, Chris Allo is coming on the show next week. Just confirmed. He and I are going to be doing a Deep Cut Dive show on Iron Maiden, a Deep Cut Dive show on Dio. That's Ronnie James Dio's solo band, Dio. Jeff Young is coming on board also for Monday morning. We've got Deep Cut Dive into the discography of Heart. Then we got Martin Popoff later in the week, Deep Cut Dives in Black Sabbath and Scorpion. So that will take us through the entire week for Deep Cut Dives next week. So you don't want to miss any of them. Plus we've got a couple other really big interviews that are coming up next week as well. So no rest for the wicked here on Sea of Tranquility. So again, we'll see you guys over the weekend. Have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.